You've spent an entire career fighting fires and rescuing the injured, sick, and dying. But that's all over now. What do you do when the sirens stop, you've hung up your gear, and you walk out of the firehouse for the last time? What do you do with your life when the smoke clears? Welcome back to the When the Smoke Clears podcast. I'm Russ Miles. I'm here with Tony Ben-Cosme. Thank you very much for joining us again for another episode with another guest who has survived a career in the fire service and is now living life on the other side. Thanks again for everyone who has supported the show. Thank you for your kind words. Thank you for your encouragement. It really means a lot. If you want to continue to support the show, we do have some costs that go along with it. You can go to the website buymeacoffee.com/whenthesmokeclears, and you can donate however much you'd like. If you're interested in buying any of our merch, hats, shirts, stuff like that, just let us know and we will hook you up with the link to do that.
Absolutely.
So, Tony, who do we have on the line with us today?
Thanks, Russ. I want to thank all the listeners also. This is great to keep trying to bring you some people that you want to hear about. And this next gentleman, definitely want to hear his story. He's a mainstay in Montgomery County Fire and Rescue Services. He was, he was the go-to guy for so much stuff. He was the ultimate leader, motivator to a lot of people. I mean, he won't say it, but people will say it for him. 35 years of service, retired as a captain, was a station commander, worked at several stations. I mean, he was like, when something was wrong, you would send in DeVries to take care of it. You know what I'm saying? He was the wolf from Pulp Fiction almost. I mean, he was something to that effect. He was on a hazmat team for 2 years. I'm gonna get out the way here and introduce our next guest, Mr. Kevin DeVries. Thank you for coming, brother.
Gentlemen, thank you for having me. Much appreciated.
Absolutely. It's great to have you on, man. I know you've been a requested guest by several folks. And I remember my time getting to work with you when I was stationed at 12 and you were at 16, the captain down there. And I always appreciated having you right up the road. But at the same time, I knew we had to be on our game because you guys were coming and you were coming hard. So it always kept us on our toes.
Yeah, one of the things I remember, because me and DeVries kind of got promoted to lieutenant, because he had more time than I did, but we got promoted roughly around the same time. He was a little earlier than me, but roughly the same time as lieutenants. But he was always, man, motivating factor, man. He always, was telling y'all, you did this, what you need to do next time, and that was good, but this was the best way to do it, or that was all right. He was never, in my experience, was always a positive influence on a lot of people. So we have over appreciated that for some of the older guys that are still around that remember you, man.
Well, thanks for that. Russell, to what you were saying with regards to working up the street from me, right? I used to sit up at the lineup table every morning and I'd always start my lineup with, let's get it started, right? Then the next thing out of my mouth, who are the players today? The help, the competition, or none of the above? And we looked at all the stations and all the lineups and who was doing what and who was where, right? Because, hey, that old adage, if you're not first, you're last. So, we always tried to stay, if you would, just a little bit in front of the ball, because as we all know, you get behind the ball, even this much, you feel like you're chasing it, right? If we can stay in front of it, get down and pick it up, it's way easier than chasing it. So,
yes, sir.
Absolutely. But anyway, I enjoyed every minute of the ride. For 35 years, people ask me what I did for a living, and I used to tell them, man, I don't work. Shit, I get up and meet up with the other woman. That's exactly how I felt about the job. It was absolutely a love affair. It truly was. To say that I had, man, I had the honor and the privilege to work around some of Montgomery County Fire's best people that, and don't get me wrong, great people are everywhere in that fire department. I still have 2 sons on the job. I used to always say, it's our fire department. It's my fire department. It'll always be my fire department. I still try to influence it. My phone still rings from time to time. Somebody will go, "Hey man," I'll be like, "Yeah, this is how I'd walk that road." But can we leave it better than we found it? Right? That's the best way to look at it. And don't think just because you're just a fire 1 or a fire 2, a master or a lieutenant, that you can't influence the fire department. You don't have to be a captain, a battalion, an assistant chief, right? Hey, good ideas come from everybody, right? And let it be known. Say, hey, just because we do it, I used to always say this, just because we do it doesn't make it right. And there's always a better way, right? You don't know what you don't know. So I always said I learned from everybody. I learned from the new kid that walked in the door because nobody knows where he's from. What do you say? Hey, rookie, just shut up and be quiet, right? Not necessarily the right way to go about it, because for all we know, the guy did or gal did 10 years in LA or 10 years somewhere in Dallas, Texas, that, they're going to open their mouth and bring something to the table where you say to yourself, they open their mouth, they say something, and you're like, well, hell, that was a piece of a puzzle I've been missing for a while. Now I can put that with what I do and make it even better. So,
all right.
Anyway. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Well said.
No question.
So, with all that being said, we usually start the interview out with hearing about our guest's origin story, so to speak. So tell us a little bit about where you were born and what life was like growing up for you.
Born in Bethesda, Maryland, Suburban Hospital, back when they had an OB ward. Lived in Rockville for a small stay. Moved to Potomac until I was 10. Our parents, my father at that point in time, decided that it was too much, how should we say, too hustle and bustle. He was looking for a change. Moved up to Frederick at about age 10, and grew up in rural Frederick County. Joined the local volunteer fire department, Newmarket, as a matter of fact, when I was, I think I just was getting ready to turn 18. When I was thinking that the fire department was what I wanted to do. Had some early influence fire department people. My father, believe it or not, was a career guy in Silver Spring, 1959 to 1961. My uncle, Bill Curtis, was a fireman downtown in DC. So they were the early parts. My father did a lot of different jobs, and he didn't stay with the fire department. He said it was the job that he loved the most but paid the least. I think back then he was making $2,500 a year.
Wow.
Right. So we sit there and we go, wow, that was peanuts, right? I started off in 1986 making $19,703 to be exact.
Man.
What you gonna do with all that money?
I took a pay cut from swinging a hammer, being a carpenter, to be a fireman.
Right.
$40 a week, I believe. About $40 a week pay cut.
Gotcha.
But it's what I wanted to do. Russell, you made mention about, growing up and influences. John Kraft retired. Captain Kraft retired. Mm-hmm. I lived all the way in the back of the neighborhood, and John wasn't that far. John and I had conversations when I was younger, because I was probably, how should we say it, in need of some direction. And he would, how should we say it, give his 2 cents. And he'd talk to you about, hey, what do you think about the fire department, Gil? And you're like, I don't know, maybe. So yeah, anyway, between my father, my uncle, John Kraft, so I joined the local firehouse. I remember going into my first burning building. It was a training exercise. I remember walking outside. I think I was burning Marlboros at the time. That's socially acceptable back then.
Yeah.
I remember coming out and burning a Marlboro and looking around. I was standing by myself, and I was thinking to myself, so this is why I'm here. and that was really it, and then it became an obsession.
Right.
It became an obsession to try to get hired. And so, my uncle, we talked about, I talked about Baltimore City. Baltimore City, I think starting salary back then was $9,000 a year. My uncle, who just recently retired from DC, is like, hey, there's a lot going on downtown right now. You do not want to work there, right? I believe he threatened to break both my legs if I was going to pursue that.
Yeah.
And, that's true. That's a truthful statement. And he was the guy for that too, by the way. And he's like, you need to go to one of these younger departments, just starting to come of age, if you will, right? And Frederick back then didn't have anybody paid, only paid drivers in the city. That was it. So the chances and the opportunities in Frederick County at the time were limited. So I applied for Anne Arundel. I applied for Montgomery. I actually moved back out of Frederick. My grandparents lived on Sonoma Road in Bethesda. So I moved. I guess I was touching 20, and I was trying to get a paid job for Montgomery. And I remember saying, "Hey, can I stay for a little while?" And they're like, "Yeah." They weren't real warm on it, but they weren't cold on it either. I hung out there for probably a year. I joined Kensington Station 5. And started getting myself, how should we say it, in the mix. Because back then, during corporation days, you had to fill out an application and you had to physically drive it around to every firehouse.
Wow.
Right? And then an interview with each one of the chiefs, if you will, and or their boards. So I guess this went on between, a total of 4 years between Frederick County and Montgomery County trying to get hired. I can tell you that I finally got a breakthrough, right? And back then they had a lot of casual laborers in the county. Casual labor, for those who don't know, basically were firefighters that were hired by the hour with absolutely no benefits, right?
Mhm.
So Spring had a lot of casual laborers. I could not walk the casual labor road because I was a young father. My oldest son, Joshua, the casual labor rate compared to me swinging a hammer rate wasn't even comparable. So I couldn't do the casual thing. But yeah, so I was starting to get my name out there, trying to interview wherever I could, having some success, and always, the interviews that you thought went well, they would tell you outright, hey, look, this is what we're looking for right now. So back then they were hiring specific groups of people at specific times, right? And that's the only way to put it. No other way. They're like, hey, Kevin, we'd love to hire you, but you're not what we're looking for right now. We're looking for a female, but thanks for spending your time. Right. So you're like, okay. So one day I walk into Station 5 and George Heflin, Donald Heflin's uncle, was assigned to Station 5. And he's like, hey, man, what's up? And I'm like, nothing. He pointed at the blackboard, and there was a lady's name. Her name was Viola Dunnington. She was the hiring lady for the county. And he looked at me and he smiled and he goes, hey, Viola tried to call you. You're in the chute, man. I don't know where you're in the chute at, but you're in the chute somewhere, right? So I called her up. I'd been placed back then. They called it the pre-select list. I'd been placed on the pre-select list with Silver Spring Fire Department. Hunter Hetzel was the chief at the time. I was scheduled to go for an interview with him on, I think it was a Tuesday. And man, I was just elated. I'm like, finally, hope something's going to happen. So I go to Lake Anna to build a house over the weekend. It was a Friday, Saturday thing. The guy I was working for is like, hey, we got a house to build in Lake Anna. So I get back home Sunday late in the afternoon, and I'd moved out of my grandparents at this point in time. I think I was living with Joshua's mother. And she's like, hey, some chief named Scotty Cameron has called you like 4 times, needs to talk to you. I called him up and I was like, Chief, what can I do for you? And he's like, I need to see you for an interview tomorrow. And I said, well, Chief, I said, with all due respect, I said, I'm on the Silver Springs pre-select list, and I've got a an interview scheduled for Tuesday morning. He said, well, son, that's all fine and dandy, but you've been traded. He said, I'll see you tomorrow. And that's exactly how it went. He hit me with like an 8 o'clock timeline, right? Hey, see you at 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock good for you? And I was like, Chief, hey, can we make it 9:30? He's like, okay, can I ask you why? I'm like, I need a haircut. And he goes, well, son, how long is your hair exactly? And I said, well, Chief, it's way above my ears. I said, but as my father always said, you get one shot at the first impression and 10 seconds to make it happen. I'm not going in there with hair looking anything other than tight. And he says, see you at 9:30. So that was the beginning of it, guys. That was the beginning of it.
Oh, wow.
I did 18 months in Bethesda under the corporation. The county was just getting ready to take over. At the time, Bethesda was 4-man engine, 4-man truck. And we were going to some fires, but they weren't going to fires like Silver Spring and Takoma Park was going to fires, and Gaithersburg. Everybody was going to fires, right? It seemed like. So a dear friend of mine, the late Kenny Kornblatt, battalion chief.
Good man.
We were roommates. We were roommates at the time, right? And we were talking. He was just getting promoted to sergeant, going to Station 8, and we were talking about me leaving Bethesda. And he's like, "Well, what are you thinking?" I said, "I'm either heading to Takoma Park or Station 8." And he goes, "Well, which one?" I'm like, "To be honest with you, I'm kind of torn." And he's like, "Really?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, why?" So I talked about what I believe the pros and cons of both places would be, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Well, let me settle this, the old-fashioned way." And I pulled a coin out of my pocket and flipped it up in the air, and I said, "Heads Takoma, tails Gaithersburg." As it was. Put in my paperwork and transferred to the park. And I can remember the older guys in Bethesda at the time shaking their head going, "What is wrong with you? Do you not see what's going on?" He's like, "There's a 4-man engine and a 4-man truck here." He's like, "You're going to a place where there's 6 of you that get 3 pieces of apparatus out. And mind you, one of them's an ambulance, right?" So off I went and had absolutely no regrets. Work with Mark McKenzie, aka Mick, Jan Eckloff, John Hannigan, Frankie Davison, Dave Maltrip, Chuck Harding, and just had a blast. I mean, just had a blast, and went to a couple fires along the way as well. So that's for sure. So that was the beginning of it, and yeah. So
okay. So what year did you go to Takoma Park? What year was that?
So the county had just taken over, and the reason why. So Norman Conway used to be the president of the union. Norman was assigned to Station 2 at the time, and I got to meet and speak with Norman, and we were talking one day, and I was like, "Hey, I want to put my paperwork in to go down to Takoma, right?" And he's like, "Hey, he's like, Kevin, you're gonna have to hold off." And I said, "Okay, tell me why." And he goes, "Hey, I just met you." And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Look, I'm gonna be real forward with you." I said, "Okay." He goes, "You go down there and you open your mouth because you're gonna give somebody your opinion, and they don't like you, you won't have a job." He's like, "You're probably gonna need to wait and get the protection of the county to some degree." And so I think I hung out for another 3 or 4 months in Bethesda, and then the county's process was starting to move forward. So the birth of our fire department in 1988. So I think I was down there. I think I started in Takoma February of '88.
So you were just a firefighter.
Just a firefighter.
Just a firefighter, and you drove engine, truck. What did you?
So funny, I became a wagon driver in Bethesda, but back then I was an anomaly with regards to them even allowing me to do it. Right, I got along really well with my lieutenant at the time. Doug Callan was his name, a great guy, and he was like E.F. Hutton, right? When that dude opened his mouth, everybody just stopped and listened, and he really put a precedence on me with regards to what a captain, because that's what he was, right? Just by rank, he was a lieutenant. That was before we had sergeants then, and then we had lieutenants, and captains were in the cars. Before we how should we say, started re-ranking, if you will, and losing sergeant. So he was the lieutenant station commander, and the guy just had a presence about him that I admired. And actually, on my last day working in the fire department, he called me.
Wow.
And I had the opportunity to tell him that, hey, thank you. And he said, for? And I said, look, the 2 years I worked for you, I said, almost 2 years, you made a hell of an impression on me on the way business should be done. No nonsense, delivering the message, just getting it done. But yeah. Anyway, where were we?
No. What was it?
Just for a second.
Yeah, no. What was the feeling like when? Because I talked to a couple guys. We've been interviewing a few people about that whole transition from corporation to the county, and that was. I mean, you were a young guy, so you're staying no matter what. But I mean, what was the feeling for some of the older guys? It was kind of different, strange. There was some apprehension, right?
Oh, Tony. So to be quite honest with you, so when I was working in Bethesda and the county was taking over, I'm not going to say mass hysteria took place, but I think there was some of that, oh my God, and they were worried that they were going to get transferred, excuse me, or they're worried about this or worried about that. Out of all the guys that were on my shift, with the exception of Kenny Kornblatt and Billy Richards, everybody else retired.
Wow.
So Doug Callum, my lieutenant at the time, had, I think, 23 years on the job. And I remember him breaking the news to everybody that he was going to leave. And I think he was the beginning of the rest of the shift to start to dismantle, saying, hey, well, if the lieutenant's leaving, we should really seriously consider it, right? And I remember how, man, I was humbled by it, right? And I was watching his demeanor, and you could tell that he was just absolutely ill about the decision that he made with regards to this. He's like, I love what I do. I love this job. And he goes, but I would have to work another, I think he told me at the table, he told all of us that with the money that they were going to give him for the early out, that he had to work another 12 or 14 years just to get what they were offering, just to make it up. So he chose to go. So I lost everybody, but like I said, Kenny Kornblatt and Billy Richards off the shift. And Kenny was getting ready to go. And what better time than to flip the coin? And I did.
It's a good opportunity to leave at that time. Yeah.
Right. So the birth of our fire department, the apprehension and the crazy stuff about it is that, at Bethesda, they had a lot of money. So, you got gear, you got, uniforms, everything else. I went to Takoma. I carried I had old Bethesda gear. I wore BFD stuff on the back of my coat, I think, for probably 7 or 8 months before they got me gear out of Takoma, because this was before logistics with our fire department, anything like that. Right. And I remember Takoma was the first corporation to allow us to take the corporation patches off of our uniform shirts and put county emblems or county patches, if you will, on our shirts. But the caveat was you had to buy the patches for $4 a piece. And then you had to have them professionally sewn on your shirt. So it was an out-of-pocket experience. But I remember the pride that we were finally being recognized, because no matter what, you would walk into somebody's house and you would have all your volunteer garb on. And don't get me wrong, I was a volunteer, right? And I get it, but finally, here the county, I think back in 1986 when I got hired, I think there was, don't hold me to the number, I'm pretty good with them, I want to say 360 career guys in the county at the time. So, guys and gals, let me clarify that. Yeah. So, we were trying to become a recognized entity, right? Where people go, oh, we go run a call and they're like, you volunteers are great. No, ma'am, this is your tax dollar hard at work. This is just the clothes they give me to wear, right? So here we are running around Takoma with, county shirts on. And like I said, the pride, we were just, you get up at 2 a.m, you're putting a uniform shirt on, right? It didn't matter. You were just doing that. But Yeah, a lot of stuff from, the corporation owning the apparatus and the maintenance or lack thereof. Then county stickers going on rigs. I remember
That was big.
Oh, that was a big deal, right? And I remember at a union meeting, they're voting on it, right? And so they're like, yeah, so we're getting county patches on the apparatus. And so my hand goes right up, and I think Amy Davis was the vice president at the time.
Yeah, Amy
So
Davis.
Amy's like, yes, Kevin, and I'm like, size of the sticker and location. And she's like, I think that's kind of irrelevant right now. And I said, well, yes or no to that. And I said, the reason why is there's some people working at certain working in certain corporations, not for the corporations anymore, but working at that corporation where the corporation would like to shrink that thing down to about the size of a quarter and put it on the inside of the wheel well of the truck. Right? So size and location matters. So it finally came out that the county stickers had to be smaller than the corporation stickers, and they had to go in the very back compartment of the rig.
Oh, that explains why they were always there. I was wondered why they were there in the back. Yeah. All right. That was an arrangement they made. So going from Bethesda, where you didn't go into other jurisdictions, because we never went into DC, going into the PG was a different animal because Takoma went into PG a lot.
Going to Takoma was a different animal because when you were in Bethesda, you got off the rig, right? And you walked around to the officer and you said, hey, what do you want, Lou? And he told you specifically what he wanted, right? There was independent thinking, but not like independent thinking, right? Because you had it in your mind what you wanted to do, but you weren't doing it until that guy, E.F. Hutton, opened his mouth and said, do this, right? AKA Doug Callan. So I remember the first fire, I went to Takoma, I got off the rig, was riding the pipe, got off the rig and went to talk to the officer and everybody's gone. I'm like, oh, okay, this is how we're doing it here. Right? So, but yeah, it was fun. It was a lot of fun. I mean, to tell you, I laughed. I'd come to work and laugh so hard sometimes at all those guys. And, Frankie Davis and I would be on an ambulance running calls and we would start cutting up and I was like, they pay us to laugh like this. Isn't this the greatest job in the world? This is the greatest job in the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah, going in the Prince George's County or other jurisdictions in general, PG was its own animal, as I think you all know. But I had a early on when I was still a firefighter and I like to think I was a sponge. If you had anything good, I was going to sponge you for it. Any knowledge, anything that you did, I'm like, man, I'm going to soak it all up, try to be the best I can be. And I remember we were in Company 1's area, Montgomery Company 1's area, and PG's 4th Battalion was having a meeting at Station 1. And 44's wagon went out driver only for some BS local, something. Didn't pay much mind to it. Next thing you know, it wasn't about 15 minutes later, they drop a PG box. And it was right on the Takoma, 44 line, if you will. And we're coming, like I said, we were touching one engine's area. So we were a minute out. We get there for the house on fire. We get there and the wagon driver only out of Prince George's County was driving the wagon. He was in all his turnout gear. He had stopped and laid out, pulled up past the house, had pulled a line to the front door, was walking back to pull the levers to charge his line to go in and put the fire out. And I remember walking up to him quickly because I wanted some of that, right?
Yeah.
And, I was like, hey, sir. All right. I probably was like, hey, man, you want some help? And he looked at me and he goes, some help would be nice, but, if not, I'm good, right? And I remember after the call how it just – I just sat back and I was like, one-man band. Here we go. Right. Right. And it was just, I guess, how should we say it? Sobering, to say, man, that guy was going to do everything he had to do absolutely by himself. And he was fine with no help. Gosh, I got to be that guy. I got to be that guy now. Right. So, but I mean, the influences were, just by actions that you saw from people and what they did and how they did it and how they looked at it. Anyway, me rambling more, guys. Sorry.
No,
No,
you're good. Go ahead.
that's yeah. I think you've touched on it, but just the culture of Takoma Park, of that aggressiveness, of
Yes.
that wanting to to be that guy that you're talking about. Like, all right, if I'm the only one here, I guess I'm the only one here, but this fire is still going out. It might take a little longer, but they called firemen and here I am. So what was it like, I guess, being in that culture of Takoma Park?
So the truck always went to PG with 4, so it would leave 2 back, right? So I remember even when I was promoted to master, because I left Tacoma as a firefighter because I got involuntarily transferred to Station 19 in 93, I think, maybe end of 92. Kicking and screaming, but I work for the fire department, and if they wanted you, they moved you, and that's just how it was.
Yes, it was.
But back to the culture of Tacoma, I remember going down the road where the truck would go to PG with 4, right? And that would leave me and a driver back, right? And it was not uncommon for me to go down the road riding as the boss on the rig and having to squirt my own water. Work with some great guys there, even the second time around when I was a master. But it was, how should we say it? I'm not going to say it was a different time and a different era, right? But, when I first came on the job, a house fire was 3 engines of the truck company and a rescue squad and the ambulance.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Right?
Yes, sir.
And
With 3 people. With 3 people, maybe.
with 3 people on everything, maybe, depending. And let's face it, I used to always say this: everybody's a fireman when there's a trash can on fire on the second floor of a bathroom. But sometimes when it's 3 rooms with some change in the basement, not so much. So it's just what it is. So, you could go to a house fire and you go and you take care of business. And then in the latter part of my career, getting ready to leave the fire department, right? 5 engine companies, 2 ladders, a heavy rescue, ambulance, battalion, 2 of them, right? The list goes on. I'm like, man, we're doing less with more, right? Than I did when I first started. We got all these guys and gals, and I thought we were pretty efficient back then because you had to be. You just had to be.
Yeah, no doubt. You had to do a lot of wear a lot of hats and get a lot of stuff done, and more was expected of you too. I'm not saying not less is expected of you. That's not the truth. It was just if you didn't do it, it seemed like it wouldn't get done.
Yeah, or it would get done way slower, right? So when you go to the fire ground, right, there's always things that, how should we say it, a sequence of events that really need to happen in a particular order, right? And we like to say, hey, be more specific, right? Okay, well, first thing I'd say, we go to a fire and I was riding a wagon, I'd look at the truck officer and be like, are we in this place yet? Are we in? I just need to know if we're in, right? If there's a basic step, if we're not in, we can't do anything, right? I need to get in first. Can you please get me in? Right. And then we go from there. So there's a progression on how things have to go. So, if there was a delay in any way, shape, or form, obviously it affected how the call goes, right?
Yeah.
And I think we've all been on calls that have gone really well, right? And you walk out and you're like, man, could it have gone better? And then you get back to the station, you start thinking about it, and you're like, well, we did this, and this. Reasonable timeline, did this. Missed this. This probably should have been moved up on the burner. This one should have probably moved back on the burner. And then I think we've all gone to calls. And even, like I said, back to the call going well, you could still critique it to the point where you're like, it could have even been better, right? Because you're always striving for perfection, right? Perfection doesn't always come, but you're striving for it every day, right? Mm-hmm. And then we've all gone to calls where you're like, well, that didn't really work out worth a damn. What happened here, right?
Right.
Some basic stuff probably didn't happen. From a line not getting deployed right? Watching companies fumble with a line and looking at a line where they're sitting there for 3 minutes playing with the line, trying to unscrew it because it's that screwed up, instead of just walking back to the wagon and pulling another line and just leave that one alone, right? The list goes on. Not getting into place, a ladder not thrown, from forcible entry to a ladder. It's really easy to see, and it's not hard to find when a call doesn't go well. You're like, okay, where was the breakdown? what didn't happen and who didn't do it. Because let's face it, 5 engine companies and 2 ladder companies, everybody's got something to do, right? It's easy to say, well, we burned the roof off the apartment building. Well, did any doors get forced directly above the fire and above, and then the 3rd floor? And then, did we make our way to the top floor in a reasonable timeline, or was there a delay? Was a fire that far in front of us? List goes on.
Right.
Anyway.
Right. So you're at Takoma Park. You said when did you got transferred to 19 forcibly? Now you're at 19. You're making it work. I mean, you're a dude that whatever, you're giving lemons, you're gonna make lemonade. But you had a good time, and you made yourself known in 19. So when did you think it was time to promote? Because we asked people, and was it a certain thing that made up your mind, or you were thinking about promoting, or was there an incident that said, okay, I got to promote to master, I got to promote to lieutenant? What was it?
Can I backtrack way far back?
Okay, go ahead.
I'm going to backtrack until when I worked in Bethesda around Doug Callan, and I remember thinking to myself at some point in time, I want my own house and my own guys and gals. There's no question about it, right? But I believe there's a progression for everything, and it's not a race, man. It's not a race. And for those who believe it's a race, you miss out on things, right? Because the experiences that you gain along the way, right? I sit in front of this camera talking to you guys, and we talk about the fire department. I'm like, man, I sit in front of you telling you stories of success, stories of failure, right? Because, as much as we hate to say something didn't go well, there were calls that I can look back on and go, well, shit, hey, can I take a mulligan on that one? Can we do that again next week? But as hard as we try for things to go right, sometimes as hard as we try, they just don't. But anyway, back to that. So early on, I always said to myself, I wanted my own house, my own guys. Then as a firefighter, I had the opportunity and privilege to work around some really solid officers, right? But as you and I, as we all sit here and listen to this, and you all ask me questions, we've all worked for some people along the way where you're like, absolutely not. If my house was on fire, that person does not get the invite. Right?
Yep.
Right? Does not get the invite, right? So,
yeah.
but we can still learn from that person, right?
What not to do, right? What not to do, just important.
Absolutely, exactly. What not to do. Hey, so you have your opportunity to work around some people, right? And then you're striving for perfection, and you're trying to put yourself out there. And, officers would, give me accolades and say, what are you doing, man? I'm like, what? I'm like, I'm having a blast. They're like, dude, you need to take some tests, right? Got promoted to master, went back to station 2, worked with a great group of guys. Joe Skinner, all these guys I love like brothers. Joe Skinner, that dude drove me almost every day. He was the senior master, didn't like to ride in charge. I wanted to ride in charge, right? That guy drove me every day. And I can tell you, just as I had the opportunity later in my career for Charlie Appleby to drive me, Joe Skinner and Charlie Appleby could finish my sentences when I was driving down the road. I'd be like, hey, fellas, I'm thinking about, and they go, I got you. Not even finish the sentence. Yeah, I know. I got you.
Absolutely.
So, you have that with you. So I went back as a master, and really, really had fun. I mean, went to a lot of fires, a couple anyway, along the way. But like I said, worked with Joe, Cliff Billingsley, Walter Bama, Chuck Hopkins, Dave Shapani. Just a variety, a plethora of guys that came in and out. And for anybody listening, I'm sorry, but I'm not slighting anybody. But there's a bunch of guys that I enjoyed working with, that I had a blast with, and they all influenced me in some way, shape, or form. So,
nice.
Yeah. But anyway, you were talking about Takoma a little bit, Tony. What else?
No, I was just because I remember that you got promoted from there, and you had, coming up, master still is a sweet spot, and you can stay at master forever. Like you really could say, okay, this is where the rubber meets the road, and you can still be kind of have your foot on both sides of the line there, and still really enjoy what you do, be part of what's going on, and still run the firehouse, and still kind of be an officer every now and then. What made you want to become a lieutenant? I know because you had years on, and we were in the same OCS, one of the first OCS together. We were in the same one together, and and that was all because you was the senior guy there. And we were like, what made him finally decide? Okay, because you could always do it. It was a choice whether you wanted to do it. And there was a lot of guys. Yeah,
absolutely. So back to the race thing. I never thought it was a race. I was a master of company 2 on the B shift, and we were ripping it up, man. I was having a blast, and we were going to fires. And when I'd get detailed out, because I was a junior master, I would get sent to firehouses to run the station for the day, right? And then one day we woke up and we could only run it for a day side or a night side, but you couldn't run it for 24 hours anymore. So the masters couldn't do a full shift. They could only do half a shift. And my lieutenant at Station 2, after the reassignment, if you will, because we had captains and lieutenants in, and my lieutenant at Station 2 was detailed out 90% of the time. It was a rarity that both officers were there. So I was always riding as the engine boss. So I had some really strong mentors in my fire department career. When I went to 19, Bob Freeman, probably one of the absolute strongest mentors I've had. And Jerry Graham, who was my captain, very organized, a well put together guy, and a great friend as well. God rest his soul.
Yes.
Then going down to Takoma, and then another one of my mentors, Billy Ale, called me up one day, and he's like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "What?" He's like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Hey, you need to stop, man. We need you a little higher up in our fire department. You need to take a test." Followed by another one of my mentors calling me probably 2 days later, because Billy and him talked, Steve Lohr, right? So they talked all the time. So then Steve Lohr calling me up going, "Hey, what are you doing?" I'm like, "Having a blast, yeah." It's like, "I talked to Ale." I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "I'm with Ale. Take a test, man. Time to go take tests." So I was like, "All right." So I took some tests. And, let's face it, I'm not that guy that would sit down. Testing for me was always a process, right? I was a father of four young boys. If I wasn't in a firehouse, I was swinging a hammer still. So the dedication of that, I always said there was nothing healthy about the testing process, because you have to lock yourself. Guys like myself had to lock themselves in a bedroom for 3-4 months at a time. Now, remember, mind you, early on, you had to gather up all your information. You had to trade with guys just to get all of the text stuff needed to study.
Yeah.
It wasn't like later on where, the union would give you, "Hey, here's your disc for $100 or whatever it was. It has all the info on it." So they only gave you a 4-month window to gather all the information, study, and then test. So usually your first test was a shit show, and that's the best way to put it, because you were busy for 4 months trying to put the information together, and you got to study for like 10 minutes, right? Mm-hmm. So I think my first promotional test, I wrote a 68 on or something. No, it was even lower than that. I was like, well, I didn't expect any different. The next one, I didn't work that hard at, because my twin boys were born, and they were born early, so we were at the hospital a lot. I studied for maybe a day, and I think I wrote a 69. That one hurt. So then the next time was, okay, I'm locking myself away, and I did. Okay. And then historically, when I locked myself away, I did really well. So then I got promoted to master, and that's when I went to Takoma. Then I took another test. Let's see. You know what? I took a little jump. I took a little jaunt out of Takoma Park for 13 months. I was right about 13 months. So I went to 29 for 13 months, working with John Gallo and Bob Freeman, and let's see, John Demetriadis, Doug Hansen. The list goes on. Stinky, just a bunch of guys. Atlee Harris. The list went on. So I went up there and hung out for like 13 months. And that was the only time I can honestly say that I enjoyed that aspect. Don't get me wrong. I enjoyed every aspect of the department, right, and what I did. But I used to ask myself questions because I was living in Frederick at the time, or Newmarket. I used to ask myself questions like, why do I drive past all these firehouses to go to work? Then I worked at 29 for 13 months, and I knew why. That's all I'll tell you. No digs on the north side, right? Because that's not
right.
But
it's a flavor. It's a type.
Hey, there wasn't enough concrete growing out of the ground there. The list went on, right? From apartment buildings to, high rise residential. I just like that mix, the if you will, what do you call it? The nighttime neighborhood communities or bedtime communities of the city wasn't my thing. I just wanted to be involved. I just needed more chaos around me. That's all.
Right.
Yep.
I just like that. But so then when I was up there, I sat down for another promotional. Let's see. I'm trying to think of the one. There's a couple of them. Yeah, no. Yep. So I was up there and I was studying with Demetriadis and those guys. Wrote a 93 or a 94 on the written. And I went into assessment center. And I took a 79. Let's see. I went in with a 93 or a 94 written. I came out of assessment with a 79.41. 0.9 of 1%. They rounded me down and I died on the list.
Oh,
right.
Terrible.
So you know what it does to you? It sets a fire under you at that point. You're like, never going to happen again.
Yep.
Right. Well, you can never say never. Right. The next one I wrote a high score on and I went into assessment center. And when I walked out of the place, I'm not going to say I walked out pompous and arrogant, right? There's a fine line between being cocky and confident and pompous and arrogant, right? And I walked out of there and I'm like, them boys are still chasing my ball. I'm good. And my score was really tall. It was in the 90s between everything. So I got promoted off that list to lieutenant. And got promoted. Went to 18 for a week, and then I ended up going back to 19. So Derek Anthony and I talked before he was getting ready to get promoted. Well, he was already a lieutenant, and he wasn't. He was at 19, and I think that he was. He and those guys weren't seeing eye to eye. So he called me before I even knew where I was going to land on the test. And he's like, hey, let me throw something at you. And I said, okay. And he goes, hey, when you get promoted, he goes, I'd like to trade with you. And I'm like, hey, I don't even know where that could possibly be. And I ended up landing at 18. So it worked out well for both of us. I know Derek spent a lot of time there and enjoyed that.
Yeah, 18.
Worked out fine for me. I got along fine with those guys at 19, so it worked out well. So, sometimes gifts come when you're not even expecting a gift, and that's something to be said for always treating people fairly, right? And maybe that was why I received that gift from Derek, because it was. So I was at 19 for. I always said I did my fire department in the rule of eights. I was a firefighter for 8 years. I was a master for 8 years. The way I was taking captain's tests, that's another story. I was going to be a lieutenant. I was a lieutenant for almost 8 years. And then after that, I was not quite 8 years as being a lieutenant, and then I got promoted to captain. But that was my.
So where did you, after you got promoted to captain, did you go to 16 right away, or how did it
this
work?
20.
20,
so
that's right.
20, and I was there for about a year. And the operations chief swung by one day and was talking to me, and it's like, hey, I need you to go somewhere for me. And I'm a firm believer in this. And for anybody that's listening that's young, you work for the fire department. If they reach out and they touch you and tell you they're moving you, smile and go, right? There are times that you can go and not like it, right? And there's times where you can go and maybe manipulate yourself a little bit. If you just get promoted, you can work on some stuff, that kind of stuff. But when your fire department truly reaches out and says, hey, man, I need you, and this is where you're going. So Steve Lohr reached out to me, said, I want to move you to Station 15. 15 at the time in 2009, 8, all that was a challenging firehouse to work at. I said, hey, I can't give you an answer right now. I'm going to have to do some investigating. Reached out and talked to some guys that were assigned there. And they're like, hey, man, there's a lot going on around here. We're mostly in the survival mode, right? And without the support of the fire chief, it's not going to work out. So Steve Lohr contacted me about 2 weeks later. He's like, need an answer. I said, swing on by and talk to me. Let's drink coffee, right? Because at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you're supposed to drink coffee, right, with your guys and gals and talk about everything and nothing, right? You can talk about the job if you want, or you can just talk about life, but you got to sit at the kitchen table at least once a day and drink some coffee with the guys and gals, right?
Mm-hmm.
My time was 3 o'clock. So Lohr swings by around 3 o'clock. We're talking. I said, look, I had the opportunity to talk to some people. I'm going to have to decline your offer right now. And he's like, okay. I don't think he was really happy about it, but he understood. And I used this one for him. I said, hey, in 1994 or 5, I said, you sent Stevie Hobbs up there at the time. Our fire department sent Stevie Hobbs to Station 15 to straighten that place out. Probably the strongest captain of the era. And they ended up spitting him out, right? And he ended up going down to Station 10. I think Stevie retired out of 10, if I'm not mistaken. And I said, that guy couldn't turn that ship. You really think without the support of anybody that I can turn that ship?
Right.
I'm gonna decline. Well, fast forward 6 months, and my phone rings at 3:30 in the afternoon. Well, no, my phone rings at like 11 o'clock in the morning. Like one of the chiefs called me. I knew the guy personally by name. He's like, "Hey, Kevin, what's up?" I'm like, "Chief, what's going on?" He's like, "Look, I'm gonna need you to call this number at 3:30. So I was thinking to myself, running through the Rolodex, because, it wasn't uncommon for me to upset somebody somewhere along the way, right? And that, I'm like, who have I pissed off lately that I am probably going to have to talk to somebody about something, right? And then my buddy on the other end of the phone says, hey, you're not in trouble for anything. You haven't pissed anybody off. Just call this number at 3:30. I was like, oh, okay. So I called the number at 3:30. And, the phone, when it's a conference call, it makes some weird noises, right? Doot, right? Next thing you know, Chief so-and-so's online. Chief so-and-so's online. You're like, when I went on, I was like, Captain DeVries is online. So you're hearing all these chiefs pop on, and they're all chiefs, right? And they're like, all right, we got everybody. Steve Lohr, the operations chief, was not involved in the call. For whatever reason, he was on vacation. And they said, moving forward with the Company 15 initiative. And I knew at that point in time, they're like, Captain DeVries? I'm like, yes, sir. They said, you've been reassigned. I said, copy that, reassigned. Effective when? They're like, tomorrow. I said, copy that, effective tomorrow. I said, well, there's a problem with tomorrow. And they said, yes, sir. What's the problem, Captain? I said, tomorrow I'm assigned to Station 20 working overtime for 24 hours. They said, Captain, understand this. You are working tomorrow for 24 hours worth of overtime, but you're going to show up at Company 15. And I said, okay, perfect. Got some information for me? We'll give it to you tomorrow. And so that was the beginning of the Company 15. How should we say it? Come together.
Yeah, it was a very interesting situation at 15.
Yeah. So I've got nothing ill to say about any of those guys on either side of the fence. We all worked to make the place what it needed to be. A lot of people chose to walk away from the fire department on the volunteer side at that point after about 4 or 5 months. That was unfortunate for our department with regards to the volunteer participation out of the place. But that firehouse is a completely different firehouse.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So I have to ask. So what did you do down there to bring it to where it ended up being?
Well, I had some really interesting conversations, and I had a guy walk into my office, one of the volunteer officers, and he say, "Captain, I got to ask you a question." I'm like, "Okay, why are you here?" I said, "Why am I here?" He goes, "Yes, sir. Why are you here?" He goes, "There's 146 captains that work in this fire department. Why are you here?" I'm like, "So yesterday at 3:00, I was assigned to company 20." I said, and at 3:35, I was assigned here. I work for the fire department. They told me I was moving. I said, "So are we looking for self-evaluation?" I said, "Because I don't know. This is all I'll say. I'm here to ensure the safety and the well-being of this community and everybody that leaves this building wearing any kind of uniform, working for Montgomery County or being a Burtonsville volunteer. Our goal is the same. We will not waver. We can sit here and talk about what we're going to do. I am not here to be the smoking police, the seatbelt police, and all this other nonsense that's going on around here. I'm here to run a firehouse. I manage firemen, not personalities. That's what we're going to do. And we're going to move forward. We're going to do it well." And I thought it worked out fine. But, I've always been good for helping somebody see things sometimes my way. That's all I can say. I always say, "Hey, we need to work on our communication skills. So let's do that." Right.
Yeah.
So,
No, that was an interesting situation. I remember I was a lieutenant and got sent up there because someone got in an argument with a lieutenant. I was at 12. I was at 12. So a lot of lieutenants would get shipped out of 12 up there because there was an issue with an officer up there. So they would flip-flop us for the night, and they would do that regularly. And, it was just, it was coming to a head. Everyone saw it coming. I mean, it wasn't, it was the guerrilla. Right?
The really good thing about it is that, Mike Barber was up there on one of the shifts. I can't remember everybody all the time. It'll come to me in a minute. Sorry. I can see his face just as plain as day. But I told him, I said, "Hey, the only thing that saves us, right, every day," and I can contest to this, that I tried to be the most consistent person always, right? That I was the same way every day, no matter what, right? We have to be consistent. All 3 shifts have to do it the same way every day. There cannot be any wavering. This is how it is, right? Because when there's a breakdown, then things start going south, right? And there can never be. It's just like the hierarchy, right? We have a hierarchy for a reason, right? Because, there's a process. No different than when you were a master and you were on a call and the lieutenant's like, "Hey, I got it." You're like, "Okay." All right. Lieutenant's doing his thing. The captain walks over and goes, "Hey, man, I got it," right? We have a hierarchy for a reason, right? So it needs to stay in place and intact. Everybody needs to do their job. And like I said, not only the officers, but the firefighters that were assigned to the firehouse at the time, those guys are, the only way to put it, man, some of them were taking an ass whooping, right? And I like to hope that I helped ease that pain. Yeah.
Well, it's a different place now, completely different. And when I tell the stories, I often tell that story how, they 7 o'clock in the morning came and then the sun came up. It was a completely shift in that whole department, in that whole 15 situation overnight.
Yes.
They were working on map books the day before. It was a complete. It just no one saw it coming. I mean, they did, but they didn't. Like you said, they didn't even tell you. They just told you to show up, and then they told you what was going on when you got there. So it was an interesting time. It was a very interesting time.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, and Paul Neal was the other officer that was assigned up there. So those guys and their firefighters, like I said, they all did a great job to try to make that place what it is today.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. He's still on the job. Paul Neal's still working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're captain down there 15 for a few months, and then
so So I'll back up a little bit. So when after the phone call that I was being reassigned, I had the opportunity to talk to the fire chief, Richie Bowers, at the time, right? I also pulled out my phone to text Chief Lore at the time, because apparently he was playing golf in South Carolina. And I think my response that I sent him, I should say my text that I sent him on my phone is hey, when you get out of that beeping water hazard on the back nine, you need to call my ass, right? So when he called me, and then I'll get back to the chief. When he called me, I was like, hey, man, I thought we talked about it. He goes, we did. And you told me that you weren't interested unless we had the support of the fire chief. Well, I got that. That's all he said. I said, copy that. I did say that. Without the support of the fire chief, I'm not interested. He goes, well, I got the support of the fire chief. So I said, yep, got it. Good talk. So the chief and I, the fire chief at this point in time, were speaking. And I'd been eyeballing Company 16 because Bob Moody, the captain at the time, was not that far from leaving.
Yes, he was.
My sights on 16. But I was very clear. I said, let me be after. And this was, I said, I got my sights on 16. I'm going to come here and I'm going to do what you're asking me to do. And you're asking me to fix something, right? And I said, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm confident that I can fix something, right? What's in it for me? I'm not going to lie to you. What's in it for me? Can I get 16 if that's where I want to go? And they're like, Chief was like, I can't make you any promises, but I will tell you that I work extremely hard to make sure that happens for you. So after about 9 months at Company 15, Moody was getting ready to retire and the phone rang. And I said, understand this. If you can't make that happen, I understand that. I am perfectly fine with finishing out my career here. So, but it ended up that, I ended up moving to 16. So, and that's where I did my final time. There was no moves after that. But
Gotcha.
yeah.
Gotcha.
So that's the condensed version of 35 years, I think.
No.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I did want to ask you about something that's slightly different, but still on topic. So you mentioned you're the at the time the father of 4 boys. And you mentioned it earlier that 2 of them are in the fire department with you. So what was that like, getting your sons into the department?
So I'm never gonna be honest with you. I never pushed on any of my boys to follow in their father's footsteps. And I remember asking them, both of them actually, and I was like, why the fire department? So let me back up a little bit without incriminating myself. Both of my sons at very young ages had what I would consider to be, how should we say it? Some eye-opening, fire-related, how should we say this? I'm really trying not to incriminate.
Yeah, I know. It just worked. Trying to find the right words.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the right words. So they were exposed early on to what I did. I remember taking my oldest Joshua, I think he was 12, not in Montgomery County, in another jurisdiction is all I'll say, into his first burning building. And it was when he came out and he was 12, I think. And I think it was the first time I heard him cuss. I heard him cuss when he told me what he thought of it, because he thought it was cool as shit, is what he said. And I said, yeah, it's kind of the only way to put it. And Nick got exposed pretty early too. So we were talking, asking them why they chose it, and they were like, hey, it's what we grew up around. It's who you associate with. He's like, the guys that come to my house, our house, or they're all on the job. So, but I'm gonna slide this out, slide over a little bit. But so that was, I guess, maybe having grown up in that environment. And let's face it, as you all know, and everybody knows, you take the job home. It's not something that you just walk into a firehouse and you're like, hey,
No.
here it is. That was never who I was, right? I was 24/7, no matter what. When I was a firefighter, I was 24/7. If my phone rang at 2 a.m, I was answering my phone. And still to this day, I'm answering my phone. And if it was fire department related, another officer calling me, asking an opinion, somebody asked me something, one of my guys calling me because of a personal issue, whatever the list went on, I can assure you that I've sat on my couch or my back porch watching the sun come up after long conversations with people along the way, right? So I lived the job, and it was a 24/7 thing for me. I've always had a problem with an off switch. And I think those who know me know that I don't idle well at all.
So what did it feel like to have your sons get hired? When they told you they got hired in the academy? I mean, I know you were proud.
This conversation I had with both of them, my sons, and that's even when they call me now, I'll answer the phone and I'll see one of them and I answer the phone, I'll be like, my son, right? And they're like, what's up, pops? So when they got hired, I remember Joshua and me talking to Nick as well. I'm like, look, this is all I'm going to say. It's a serious business, as you know, right? Your father worked long and hard, right, to pave his own road, to make a name for himself. It's up to you. You're not filling anybody's shoes. The only shoes you have to worry about filling are your own, right? But know this. I worked hard for the family name. Don't fuck it up. Okay. That's all I got.
Nice.
Go pave your own road. Go pave your own road.
Right.
So,
gotcha.
yeah.
And I think it's safe to say they've both done that.
Yeah.
I'd like to hope. Yeah,
they have.
Yeah. But it's one of those things you just don't expect. But when they decide to do it and make the turn, one of my other sons who was in the Army for quite some time, and when he came out, he was talking about the fire department, and they all, when they talk, they call it the family business, right? They're like, oh, you're thinking about the family business, huh? The fire department. So he actually walked that road for a short time and he decided against it, but. There was some laughter going on when hey, Kevin Michael's talking about maybe the family business. I'm like, okay, here we go.
Nice. All right. Oh, coming back to you. So you're at 16, and how long did you do at 16?
I think I got there in 20 and 10, and I walked out of the door. March of 21. So. I did 35 years in one shift. I tried to walk out of the firehouse the same day I walked into the firehouse. I walked into the firehouse March 24th, 1986. I walked out of the firehouse, I think March the 25th. It might have been 26th because it didn't fall on the same day. So, but I tried.
Pretty close.
Yeah, it was
pretty close. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
A humbling day, I can tell you that. I remember you're in the drop, and it's funny, you hear guys saying, oh, I can't wait to get in the drop. Like, all I ever wanted to do was the fire department. It's an identity thing, right? It's not, for me, it was never a job. It was everything that I was involved in, right? Everything. So trying to prepare myself early on for the disconnect, I was like, how am I going to do with this? I've been riding fire trucks forever. How am I going to be? And I remember 31 years sitting at the kitchen table with Vanessa, and we were talking. And if I would have signed that day, I would have walked out the firehouse the same exact day I came in. And I had been preparing to sign the papers for probably 6 months, even previous to looking at the papers on the date that I needed to turn them in by. And I'm like, I don't know if I can do this, because you're signing the end.
Yeah.
You're signing the end, right? When you put your name and you sign that paper and you push send, because now you had to sign it then and send it. So now I think it's probably done all electronically.
Computer, yeah, it is.
Yeah, so it's like, oops, and you're gone. So I remember signing my name or not signing my name and saying, I don't think I can. And she's like, well, how do you feel? I'm like, I feel great. The bottom line is, physically I was still fine. But yeah, so I couldn't sign the papers. So I went one more year because I had to go a whole another year, right? Because then I wouldn't have walked out, close enough, right? Because that's just how I am. I'm programmed stupidly like that.
Yeah.
So I waited a whole nother year. Now, when that date came, it was easier to sign. And I know you guys still remember Ronnie Ricks and some of the guys
Ronnie Ricks.
years gone by. And everybody, even I still have guys from time to time say, hey, when is it time to go? Tell me when should I go? I'm like, everybody's different, right? But I'm going to say this. It all depends on in what facet you are doing of the fire department, right? What job you're doing in the fire department, right? With regards to leaving. For me to sit there, when I walked out the door at age 57, for me to sit there and say, hey, I could look over to the young guy on my shift who's 26 years old and say to myself, I can keep up with him. My mind says I can keep up with him. My body 3 minutes into it, it'd be like, hey, dumbass, what are you trying to do? Right? So I always said, hey, I'm good to direct that energy. I just, you have to keep up to some degree though, right? It's not like, hey, go put that out. I'll be there in 10 minutes. No, you still need to be within the timelines. So where the really big turning point for me was this, and it wasn't, I'm riding the front seat of a fire truck, right? And for those who do it and have done it, when you're going down the road riding the front seat of an engine company, you're processing a lot of stuff, man. And the processor is moving like lightning speed sometimes, and people are talking and the radio's chirping, and you're yelling at the driver for something, or the driver's yelling at you for something, vice versa, whatever. And we get a little older, and then my issue where I decided that was really the biggest problem for me is that when you can't see or hear, you miss stuff. And when you miss stuff, that's the processing, right? Now we talked about being always in front of the ball. Well, you miss stuff and you start putting yourself behind the ball. And it's humbling because you're used to functioning at a certain level, and then old man time starts to catch up with you. And next thing you know, you miss something here and you're like, shit. And sometimes your misses that you miss, and this even goes for the young guys, you'll go down the road and you're looking at the map book, right? And you're like, oh yeah, this is definitely where I want to go. And you're directing. Next thing you know, the box gets canceled, right? But you're 2 blocks from the place. And you're like, hey, continue on. Just go on in there. I just want you to drive down there. I know everybody's going to service. And you get up to the building, and you're looking at the map and you're looking at the building, you're like, well, fuck. Good thing we didn't make it all the way here, because that wouldn't have worked. Right? Right? But nobody knows that on the rig but you, right? Because you're
right.
And you might have looked at the book wrong, or you might have whatever, right? So there's times that you're gonna err and nobody's gonna know. And there's other times you're gonna err and you're standing on the side of 495 with your drawers in your hand going, yep, these are mine. Right? You're gonna air it out in front of everybody. All you can do is own it.
Right.
So this is what I'll say to any of the guys out there, and you're thinking about a timeline, 55, man. After 55, the processor starts slowing down because you won't be able to see and hear like you want to.
Yes, sir.
Things will start moving in a direction you don't care for.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all part of life. So enjoy the ride.
That's right. It's not where you're at when you get the drop. It's where you end up being when you're at the end, man. And you're like, oh my God, I'm pushing.
Well said, Tony. We want to be able to bend down and tie our shoes in the morning. That's important, right? Yeah. Right. You don't want somebody to be like, hey man, I'm so broken I can't even. So yeah. So for anybody that's 60 years old that's still riding a fire truck and you think you're effective, you probably need to look in the mirror. All I'm saying.
I think everybody says that, but I mean, you can't convince people.
Oh no, there's no convincing. Like you said, it's all a mindset and what you think you can and can't do. And if you're a battalion chief or an operations chief, that's a different thing.
Different, yeah.
Like I said, everybody's got a thing, but at some point in time, it does end, and it will end, right?
Mm-hmm.
The game is you're going to hang up your lid and go, man, and take those last steps out of a firehouse and turn around and be like, one of my guys that worked for me when I was at 16, Wayne Cole, who was my medic. And I still remember it to this day. The morning I got up, I did the full shift, and all my guys were out there in the engine room, and we're out there BSing and laughing and joking. And C shift guys are there, and everybody's cutting up. We're all carrying on. And Wayne Cole looks at me and says, "Well, boss, it's closing time. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here."
Yes.
Well said. Well said. So
what it feel like when you turn all your stuff in, and now it's the beginning of the end? Did your mind click, or how did that work?
So, I think that, as I said, I try to prepare myself way early on signing the drop paperwork, because, you get in the drop and you're like, man, 3 years is a long time. Guess what? You're going to feel like Rip Van Winkle. You're going to go to sleep and you're going to wake up and you're going to go, shit, I got 2 months left, man. Damn. And then, now it's 3 shifts. And I can remember, not to backtrack and sidetrack a little bit, but I remember probably my last month on the job, if not more, probably right around a month. And Charlie Appleby walked in the office, like, hey, what do you want to do? Like, let's go drive around, man. Let's just go drive around, see what we can't get into, right? See if we can't hurt somebody's feelings, get into something. I said, and I drove around to some of the stations. I had him drive me to 26 where it all started, right? I remember walking in the place, closing my eyes, and the place still smelled the way it did in 1986 when I walked in the place, right? And it takes you back, and you're like, man, 35 years have gone by of doing this stuff. And I swung by 19. I got to work at Station 2 about a month, I think, before, a little bit more than a month before that. So, but Station 2 wasn't the same Station 2 that I worked at for years. It's new now, nothing like it was.
Yeah,
that old place was full of character. But so we just drove around. We drove to firehouses I was assigned to, and just I would sit there in the rig, and we're driving around and just remembering why I did it for so long, and remembering all the great times that I had, and all that I did. And I wouldn't have changed it for the world. I wouldn't change anything. Like I said, I didn't get up and go to work, man. I met up with the other woman for 35 years. And I feel blessed that I can say that.
Absolutely.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So once you are done and you turn in the gear and you're officially retired, tell us about that first month.
So the first month you're on leave, man. That's it. You're on leave, right? So, I never burned a lot of leave when I was on the job, right? And that I always felt like you always feel like you're going to miss something, right? And you're like, and I remember Chase Fabrizio was my lieutenant for a while, and I would go to the beach, take my family to the beach, and I'm like, hey, don't you go calling me for some BS, right? You got the helm, right? So next thing you know, my phone would be ringing. I'd be like, hey, what's up? And he's like, nothing. I'm like, are you getting ready to rub something, man? And he's like, oh, what? No. But yeah, so we went to a fire yesterday, but no worries, right? So he would start in with that. And I don't even know why I talk to you, right? So back to turning everything in. Turning everything in wasn't a big deal, right? It was just one of those days. Being off for a month, the first month, you felt like you were on leave, but where I was going with not taking much leave throughout my career, after about 2 or 3 shifts, I was ready to go back to work. So after being off for a couple shifts, you wake up and you're like, man, I should be at work. No, that's not how that goes anymore. Not doing that. It's not what we do now. So, I do all kinds of stuff. I still put my nail apron on from time to time. Help some people out. make a couple dollars to stuff in my drawer. I deliver tractors on Thursday for a buddy of mine who owns a John Deere dealership down here. So I do that Thursdays only. That's it. He wanted me to come to work and like work. And I was like, no. No need for that. Yeah, no need for all that. So I do that. I shovel a lot of shit around here, literally. My girls are still young, so they keep me busy. I'm always going somewhere doing something. But yeah, so I don't idle, never have. Excuse me. And I always said when I walked away from the fire department that I'd already read the book and I was going to close the book and move on. And I can tell you in the last 2 weeks, one of the local volunteer firehouses down here, I've done some engine company evolutions, doing some, how should we say it, advancing some attack lines, talking about some theory, the reasons why we do what you do, how to be efficient. Let's say, proficiency, it starts with being proficient, then efficiency comes after. It's a building block. So I can say that I've enjoyed the 2 drills that I've, how should we say it, been involved in that. But as far as riding a fire truck, I don't know if I'm there anymore. And the reason why is that, hey, I'm 61 years old. I'm looking at the guy that's 25, I can't keep up with you, man, and I'm not going to try. I had my time. I can open my mouth and speak to a lot of stuff. You have some questions, there's a good chance I've done it or I've screwed it up in some way, shape, or form to tell you, hey, this is a good way to do it. Don't do it that way. But yeah.
All right. Well, knowing we know now, man, and your career has been fantastic and everything you've done. Now that you're retired and you're retired for a little bit now, and you wake up in the morning, and you look in the mirror, who's the man looking back at you?
The older version of me. The older version of me. Yeah, who's the guy looking back? I'm still the same guy. Lenny Fitch, Monty Fitch's dad, put it real simple years ago after he retired in around 2000, I remember. And we were talking shortly after that. I think I went and I sat down with Lenny. I was working on a promotional exam, and we were talking about different aspects of the assessment center. So I sat down with Lenny, and he was kicking some ideas. Bright man. And I was like, Chief, retirement. How do you feel about it? And he goes, Kevin, he goes, it was great. I love my job. He's like, it was great. And he said and he was on the job for over 30 years. I can't remember exactly how many. He goes, so he rolls off the amount of years. He goes, I can say that I was part of something really great. And he was one of the guys that was part of the foundation of Montgomery County Fire, right? And he goes, I could say that, I was part of something great. Now he says I can say that I used to be part of something great. And I remember how humble I was. I was like, man, that's kind of tough. So the same thing, I could say that, man, I did a lot to try to influence that fire department every day from, being involved in writing policies, to the being involved in writing the IRP or portions of the IRP, because that's an evolution. That thing is going to continue to grow, and as things change, it can be adjusted easily. But those early concepts of trying to be part of something that in 20 years say, hey, are they still operating with something that was done 25 years ago? Because it still works, right? Yeah, that old saying, we don't know where we're going if we don't know where we've been. There's a lot to be said for that, right? There's an absolute lot to be said for it. So, you can talk to guys. We talk about corporation days, and now the young firefighters that are coming in on the job don't even understand some of the struggles that the early career guys had. We'll use Station 8 as an example.
Yes, sir.
A week the volunteer chief there, was it Doc Wilson? Was that it? I think that was his name, wasn't it? Not to throw names out there.
No.
He after the county fair, for a week after the county fair,
Yes.
those guys would have to go there and pick up chicken bones
Yes.
and crash at the county fairgrounds, right?
That was a thing for real. Yeah. I
There
was a rookie at
nothing that
8.
they could do about it. So for all you guys that are wearing that shield proudly and that patch on your shoulder, understand, man, a lot of guys and gals ate some shit, and that is the only way to put it, for you all to have what you have. So when some old dude walks in the firehouse, or some older lady walks in the firehouse and says, I used to work for the fire department here years ago. Hey, make sure you open all the doors for them and ask them if there's anything they get them some sweet tea or something, right? Because they deserve something. And by the way, say, hey, thanks, appreciate it. Look what I have now.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
Yeah. But so but definitely a long road. But the evolution of the fire department, if you really think about it, here's the other thing. You hear the younger guys talking about tradition and the lack of tradition, right? Oh, Montgomery has no tradition. I want to go here. I want to go there. Hey, it's up to you all to create the tradition. If you really think about it, that fire department is 40 years old. That's nothing. That's nothing.
Yeah.
And that's part of the podcast and everything else, trying to get these stories out to people, to let them know that there were people before them. This just didn't happen, and that you're sitting on other people's shoulders, man. You are sitting on other people's shoulders, and that's why you got 4-person staff, and that's why you got a paramedic on there, and that's why you get these new fire trucks, and this is all there, 24, 48, you name it. It just didn't appear out of thin air. People had to work for this stuff.
Yep, there was a lot of guys and gals that beat their head against the wall to try to make sure that, absolutely that things get better, right? And like I said early on, you can sit around a kitchen table and bitch about it, or put yourself in a position to influence it. Work hard.
Amen.
Leave it better than you found it. That's all I got.
Amen.
Exactly. Man, no, that's 100%. I don't think there's too much else to say other than that.
Hard stop. Yep.
Mhm.
Period.
So, Cam, if there was if people wanted to get in touch with you, what's the best way they can get in touch with you?
Hey, so anybody who knows me knows that I don't have Facebook anything. So all you got to do is just reach out, and I'm sure somebody has my phone number. I can give you my phone number because I don't care, right? So 301-325-9649. Got a question? I'm not going to tell you I know all the answers, but I've always said you got to screw up a lot of shit to know what I know. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, listen, man, I just want to say, and we say it to a lot of our guests because they don't hear it. Maybe they hear it. And sometimes, we do this whole thing where it takes time for you to process everything you've done. And we don't do a true accounting because every day we go to work, it's the next thing. It's the next thing. We don't, what I'm saying? We keep moving forward. Thank you, brother. Thank you for your service. Thank you for everything you've done for the county and for the citizens. And you're appreciated, man.
Thank you all for allowing me to bend your ear and perhaps bore you at times along the way here today. But no, it's always good to talk about it. It's always fun. It's like I said, greatest job in the world. And that's the way I look at it. I really do. So
Yes, sir.
enjoy the ride. Enjoy the ride.
Yes, sir.
That's it.
All right, Captain Kevin DeVries, thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate you.
Thank you, sir.
Once again, thank you all.
Thanks for listening to the When the Smoke Clears podcast. Be sure to check out our social media pages on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok. Just search for the When the Smoke Clears podcast. Feel free to email us at whenthesmokeclears8@gmail.com. That's whenthesmokeclears and the number 8@gmail.com. You can also support the show by going to the website buymeacoffee.com/whenthesmokeclears and donating however much you'd like.